fifth graders, welcome to lesson 5.6, Divide Decimals. The essential question for this lesson is, how can you place the decimal point in the quotient? Now, go ahead and open up in your Go Math workbook to lesson 5.6, found on page 111, and let's get started. Now, let's take a look at question number 2 together. For question 2, they give us 4/10 divided by 2/10. Now, the key to decimal division is this. You must multiply your divisor by a power of 10 in order to make it a whole number before dividing. Well, what I know is this. Our divisor in this problem is 2/10. Now, in order to turn 2/10 into a whole number, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take my 2/10 and I'm going to multiply it by a power of 10. Well, what I know is, in order to turn 2/10 into a whole number, I simply have to multiply that by a 10. Because when I multiply by 10, what that means is I can move the decimal one place to the right, and that's going to turn my 2/10 into a whole number. So 2/10 multiplied by 10 is going to give me the whole number 2. So once again, all we've done is this. We've taken our divisor 2/10, and I've moved that decimal one place to the right, making that now the whole number 2. Now here's the key to decimal division as well. Whatever power of 10 you multiply your divisor by, you also have to do the same to your dividend. So I'm going to take my 4/10 and I'm going to also multiply my 4/10 by 10. Because once again, I have to multiply by the same power of 10 for both my divisor and my dividend. Now, when I multiply 4/10 by 10, once again that means I'm going to move the decimal one place to the right, and 4/10 now turns into the whole number 4. So once again, what I've done is I've taken that decimal and I moved it one place to the right, and now 4/10 has also become the whole number 4. So I'm now going to come out to the side and I'm going to rewrite my division problem. I now have the whole number 4 being divided by the whole number 2. Well, what I know is 2 goes into 4 2 whole times. So I'm going to write a 2 up top, and I know that 2 times 2 is going to give me 4. So I'm going to write my 4 down here, and then I know that I have to subtract. Well, 4 minus 4 is going to give me 0. Well, now that my remainder is 0, I can go ahead and stop my division, and what I know is this. I know that 4/10 divided by 2/10 is going to now give me a quotient of 2. Now, let's take a look at question number 4 together. For question 4, we have 5 1800 being divided by 3700. Once again, the key to decimal division is this. You have to multiply the divisor by a power of 10 in order to make it a whole number before dividing. Well, in this case, once again, my divisor is 3700. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take that 3700 and I'm going to multiply it by a power of 10 to make it a whole number. So I have my 3700. Now here's what I know. I would need to move the decimal over 2 times to the right to make it a whole number. So that means that I have to multiply my 3700 by 100 in order to make it the whole number 37. Now, all that means once again is this. We're taking our decimal and we're going to move it once, twice to the right in order to turn 3700 into the whole number 37. Now remember, whatever we multiply the divisor by, we also have to multiply the dividend by the same power of 10. So I'm now going to take my 5 1800 and I'm now going to multiply my 5 1800 also by 100. Now once again, all that means is I'm going to be moving that decimal 2 times to the right. So 5 1800 now turns into 518. Don't forget, you have to make sure that you're multiplying both the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10. So once again, when I multiply 5 1800 by 100, I get 518. So what we've done once again is this. We move that decimal over once, twice to the right, so that now we have 518. Now I'm going to come out to the side and I'm going to rewrite that division problem. I now have 518 being divided by the whole number 37. So let's check out our division steps. Remember, division involves dividing, multiplying, subtracting, checking, bringing down, and then you start the process over again. So let's go ahead and see what we can do here with our division. First of all, I have 518 being divided by 37. I'm going to start in the hundreds place here with my 5. I know that I can't divide a 5 by a 37, so I'm going to go ahead and move over here and look now at my 51. Well, what I know is 37 can go into 51 one time. So I'm going to write a 1 up top right above that 1. And now I'm going to go ahead and work the multiplication because the second step says to multiply. 1 times 37 is going to give me 37. So I'm going to write my 37 down. And now my next step says to subtract. So I'm now going to subtract here. Well, what I know is I can't take 7 away from the 1, so I'm going to have to regroup. That 5 becomes a 4, and that 1 becomes 11. 11 minus 7 is going to give me 4, and 4 minus 3 is going to give me 1. Now, let's check to make sure we're okay. Is 14 less than 37? It is, so we know we're on the right track. Now, the next step says to bring down. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down my 8 next to my 14. So now I have 148 being divided by 37. Now it becomes kind of a guess and check. I like to look at my 3 and my 14 to kind of give me a good place to start. I know that 3 would fit into 14 about 4 times. So what I'm going to do is over to the side, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to write down my 37, and I'm going to multiply it by 4 and see where that takes me. Remember, it's just a guess and check. 4 times 7 is going to give me 28, so I'm going to regroup the 2. I know that 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is going to give me 14. Our guess and check was pretty good because what we now know is I have 148 here and I have 148 here. So I'm going to go ahead and write this 4 up top. And once again, I know that 4 times 37 is going to take me to 148. So I'm going to write down my 148, and I'm going to now subtract. And that leaves me with a remainder of 0. Well, when my remainder is 0 and there's no other numbers left to bring down, we've already divided all the numbers, we can go ahead and stop our division. So what we know is 5 and 18 hundredths divided by 37 hundredths is going to give us a quotient of 14. Now let's take a look at question number 8. For question 8, they give us 12 and 24 hundredths divided by 34 hundredths. Well, as my first step, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my division problem. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my 12 and 24 hundredths, and I'm going to rewrite it, and I know that I'm dividing my 12 and 24 hundredths by 34 hundredths. Now remember, the key to decimal division is this. You must multiply your divisor by a power of 10 in order to make it a whole number before you can divide. Well, what I know is this. I know that if I have 34 hundredths, I could move my decimal point over once, twice to the right, and that would give me the whole number 34. So what that means is, if I take my 34 hundredths and I multiply it by 100, it's going to take me to the whole number 34. Now, let's illustrate what we've just done. We've taken that decimal, and because we're multiplying by 100, we're going to move it over once, twice to the right. So 34 hundredths now becomes the whole number 34. Now remember, whatever power of 10 we multiply the divisor by, we also have to do the same thing to the dividend. So now I'm going to take my 12 and 24 hundredths, and let's go ahead and write down 12 and 24 hundredths. And I'm going to also multiply that by 100. Because once again, you have to multiply both the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10. Now, when I multiply 12 and 24 hundredths by 100, it just means I'm going to move the decimal over once, twice to the right. So 12 and 24 hundredths now becomes 1,224. Now, let me show you up top again what we just did. All we've done is we've taken that decimal in 12 and 24 hundredths, and because we're multiplying by 100, we're going to move it over once, twice to the right. So 12 and 24 hundredths now becomes 1,224. And now we're ready to go ahead and work the division. So let's go ahead and start with our division steps. As a reminder, I'm going to write our steps out to the side. We know that we have to divide, multiply, subtract, check, and then bring down. So I'm going to go ahead and start looking at my division problem. First of all, I have a 1 in the thousandths place. Well, I can't divide this 1 in the thousandths place by 34, so now I'm going to move over here to the 2. So now we're looking at our 12. Well, I can't divide 12 by 34 either. So now I'm going to move over to the 2 in the tens place. So now I have 122 being divided by 34. Now it kind of becomes that guess and check. I'm going to think about my 3 going into the 12, and what I know is 3 goes into 12 about 4 times. So I'm going to take my 34 and I'm going to multiply it by 4 first and see where that takes me. So over here out to the side, I'm going to take my 34 and I'm going to multiply that by the whole number 4. Well, 4 times 4 is going to give me 16. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Well, what I know is 136 is bigger than 122. So I have to try a lower number. So what I'm going to do next is this. I'm going to take my 34 and I'm now going to multiply it by 3. Well, I know that 3 times 4 is going to give me 12, and 3 times 3 is 9, plus the regrouped 1 is going to give me 10. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue working my problem, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place that 3 above that 2 in the tens place. And I know that 3 times 34 is going to take me to 102. So I'm going to write down my 102. So here's my 102. And then once I've multiplied, I know that my next step says to subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract here. 2 minus 2 is 0. 2 minus 0 is going to be 2. And 1 minus 1 is 0. Now my next step says to check. Is 20 less than 34? And it is, so I know that we're on the right track. Now my next step says to bring down. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring down my 4 next to my 20. So now I'm looking at 204 being divided by 34. Once again, it's kind of a guess and check. I'm going to look at my 3 going into my 20, and what I know is 3 goes into 20 about 6 times. So I'm going to take my 34 and I'm going to multiply it by 6. So I'm going to come over right here, and I'm going to take my 34 and multiply it by 6. I know that 6 times 4 is 24, and I'm going to regroup the 2. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 2 more is going to give me 20. So what's nice is I've ended up with my 204, which is the number that I need here. So I'm going to come back to my division problem, and I'm going to go ahead and write my 6 up here above that 4 in the ones place. Now that takes care of the division. The next step says multiply. 6 times 34 I know is going to give me 204. So I'm going to go ahead and write down my 204. And then my next step says to subtract. Well, I know that when I subtract, I'm left with the remainder of 0. So what that tells me is this. I know that 12 and 24 hundredths divided by 34 hundredths is going to give me a quotient of 36. Now, let's take a look at question number 10. It's one of our real-world problem-solving questions, and number 10 says, at the market, grapes cost 85 cents per pound. Clarissa buys grapes and pays a total of $2.55. How many pounds of grapes does she buy? Well, what we know is this. We know that at the market, grapes cost 85 cents per pound, and that Clarissa pays a total of $2.55. So our problem becomes, we're taking that $2.55 and we're now dividing that by the 85 cents, which is the cost per pound, because we want to know how many pounds of grapes she buys. Now remember, the key to decimal division is this. You have to multiply your divisor by a power of 10 in order to make it a whole number. Well, what I know is this. If I multiplied 85 hundredths by 100, what that means is I would move the decimal over once, twice to the right, and that would now become the whole number 85. Now remember, whatever you multiply the divisor by, you also have to do the same thing to the dividend. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to multiply 2 and 55 hundredths by 100. And what that means is I can move that decimal over once, twice to the right, so that 2 and 55 hundredths now becomes 255. Now our next step is just to now work the division. So I now have 255 being divided by 85. And what we've done is we've multiplied both my divisor and the dividend by 100. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a note of that so you can remember what we've done. We multiplied them both by 100, which means you move the decimal over once, twice to the right for both the divisor and the dividend. Now let's take a look once again at our division. Once again we have 255 and we're dividing that by 85. Well, I'm going to start with my 2 in the hundreds place, but what I know is I can't divide that 2 by my 85. So I'm now going to move over to my 5 in the tens place. So now I have 25 being divided by 85. And I can't divide 25 by 85 either. So now I'm going to move to my 5 in the ones place. So now we have 255 being divided by 85. Now it becomes our guess and check. What I like to do is this. I think about my 8 and I think about a 25. And I ask myself, about how many times would an 8 fit into a 25? And what I know is this. I know that 8 would fit into 25 about 3 times. So for my first guess and check, I'm going to take my 85, and I'm going to write down the 85 here out to the side, and I'm going to multiply that by 3. Now, I know that 3 times 5 is going to give me 15. I'm going to regroup the 1. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 1 is going to give me 25. Now, my guess and check was pretty good here because I ended up with my 255, which is the number that I'm trying to get to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to my division problem, and I'm going to write that 3 above the 5 in the ones place. Now, I know that 3 times 85 is going to take me to my 255. So I'm going to write that number down, and then I'm going to go ahead and subtract, and I'm left with a remainder of 0. So what that tells me is this. I know that 2 and 55 hundredths divided by 85 hundredths, or in this case, $2.50 divided by 85 cents, it enables us to buy 3 pounds of grapes. Now, let's take a look at question number 11. For question 11, it's one of our real-world problem-solving questions, and it says, Damon kayaks on a river near his home. He plans to kayak a total of 6 4/10 miles. Damon kayaks at an average speed of 1 6/10 miles per hour. How many hours will it take Damon to kayak this 6 4/10 miles? So what we know is this. He's kayaking a total of 6 4/10 miles at an average speed of 1 6/10 miles per hour. So what happens is we're going to take our 6 4/10, that's our total miles, and we're going to divide that by our 1 6/10 miles per hour because once again, we want to know how many hours it will take Damon to kayak the 6 4/10 miles. Now remember, the key to decimal division is this. You have to multiply your divisor by a power of 10 in order to make it a whole number before dividing. Well, I know that if I were to move that decimal over 1 time to the right, I could make that the whole number 16. And if I'm just moving 1 time to the right, what that means is I'm multiplying by 10. So I'm going to go ahead and make that move. I'm going to move that decimal over 1 time to the right. So my 1 6/10 now becomes the whole number 16. Now remember, you also have to multiply the dividend by that same power of 10. So what that means is I'm going to take my decimal and I'm going to move it over 1 time to the right because I'm multiplying the dividend also by 10. So I know that 6 4/10 now becomes the whole number 64. And once again, all that we've done is this. We've multiplied both the divisor and the dividend by 10. And I'm going to make a little note of that so we remember what we've done. So we multiplied both by 10, which just means you move the decimal over 1 time to the right for each of the divisor and the dividend. So our problem is now 64 being divided by 16. Well, what I know is this. I can do a guess and check, and I can think about how many times do I think 16 might fit into 64. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out to the side and I'm going to try a guess and a check. I'm going to take my 16 and I'm going to multiply it by a 4. I know that when I multiply 4 times 6, it's going to give me 24. So I'm going to write the 4 down. I'm going to regroup the 2. I know that 4 times 1 is 4, plus the regroup 2 is now going to give me a 6. So I know that my guess and check was pretty good because I've got 64 here, and I'm looking for 64 over here. So what that means is, in my division problem, I'm going to put my 4 here above that 4 in the ones place, and now I'm going to multiply 4 times 16, and 4 times 16 is going to give me 64. Now when I subtract, I'm left with the remainder of 0. So what that tells me is this. When I divide that 6 4/10 miles by 1 6/10, which is the average speed, it's going to take Damon 4 hours to kayak the 6 4/10 miles. Now, for your homework for tonight, I would like you to complete question number 1, as well as question number 2, along with numbers 3 through 6 found in your Go Math workbook on page 112. Don't forget to assess yourself. Somewhere on your workbook page, I want you to let me know, do you feel like you're number 1, a novice, number 2, an apprentice, number 3, a practitioner, or number 4, an expert? Once again, don't forget, your homework questions for tonight will be to complete number 1 and number 2, as well as numbers 3 through 6 found in your Go Math workbook on page 112. We hope you have a great evening. We look forward to seeing you at school tomorrow.